Hello and welcome back to the Youth Suite. I'm your host Ibrahim Rahman. Joining me today is Ryan Johnson, who is a science teacher from Cambridgeshire. Ryan, it's great to have you with us. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you, Ibram. How are you?
I'm very well too, thank you. Let's get started by telling us about yourself and your background.
I'm originally from Cambridge. I went to Cheston Community College. I then went on to Long Road Sixth Form College, where as a teacher, you could say I started to take education a bit more seriously then. I later went on to the University of Kent to study biomedical sciences. I was lucky enough to also take part in a year abroad where I went to Malaysia to, in quotation marks, study, but we were the test sort of scheme, if you want to put it that way. And we had a bit of fun. And then obviously I came back to finish off my a degree at University of Kent, which I got a first class with honours. And then I went back to Malaysia to actually to teach over there. And recently I've come back to England. I think that was 2018 to basically do my teacher training and start living over here, really, which has been quite a interesting experience.
That's wonderful. Congratulations on your first class in your degree. In fact, you're our second guest who is a biomedical sciences graduate to appear on the Youth Suite, so I thought I'd just drop that in.
Oh, sweet.
But rather than go down the route of becoming a biomedical scientist, you've gone into teaching.
Yes.
So what inspired you to become a teacher, Ryan?
That's quite an interesting question because, as you could probably imagine, I wanted to. I was doing biomedical science at university. So originally I wanted to become a doctor, and I think like most youth nowadays, sort of studying for their GCSEs, they're quite they have an uncertain future. They're not entirely sure what they want to do really yet. They're sort of at school. I think that I was in the same sort of position as a 15 or 16-year-old. At GCSE, I didn't get the best grades, nor did I pick the right A levels to get to go straight into medicine. So logically, I thought, well, I'd like to become a doctor, and the easiest way to get onto the course would be to do biomedical sciences, as it's very related to medicine. I really enjoyed it, and I was making sort of the progress to pursue that dream of becoming a doctor. I even gained some incredible access for some work experience at Addenbrooke's Hospital, which was really quite eye-opening. Actually, it was actually honestly quite amazing. But I went to Malaysia, as I said earlier on. I did my year abroad over there, and basically that sort of allowed me to see there's a lot more to life than sort of what we are, well, you could say, taught over here. And I soon realized that I was probably chasing a dream that really wasn't realistic. And then when I sort of realized that, I thought, well, actually, I want to sort of help others, and becoming a teacher was sort of the career that I wanted to go down. We're very privileged to live in a country like England, where everything is top notch, and the education is fantastic, and the healthcare is brilliant as well. It wasn't Malaysia per se, it was all the other sort of poorer countries in the southeast of Asia where you see poverty really, and then you realize how lucky you are. And then I thought, well, actually, I was kind of probably chasing the dreams of money and being a doctor rather than being realistic and enjoying life, sort of thing, if that makes sense.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, Ryan, and I can relate to much of what you said from your time in Malaysia. I remember when I visited Bangladesh back in 2002, and just from what I can remember, I definitely learned to appreciate how fortunate I am to live in the UK, where we've got access to education and healthcare services that I would say are world class. But from what you've said, it seems like your experiences in Malaysia really had quite an enormous impact on you. It was a big eye-opener, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yes, it was really eye-opening. And for the good. I think my experience in Malaysia has made me a completely different person for the best. Which is really good, and I'm really happy that I went over there.
That's lovely to hear. So let's talk about teaching then. So how does one get into teaching? What did you have to do in order to become a teacher yourself, Ryan?
Now this, I had to make detailed notes on this because even I get so confused with all the different routes into teaching. It is extremely confusing. So there are quite a few different routes to get into teaching, and I obviously chose the one that I felt was best for me. So I took a PGCE, which is a postgraduate certificate of education, and then so that's the one that you're basically linked to a university. So for my case, the University of Cambridge. And basically, you go to lectures and learn sort of about the methodology of teaching, and then you also go into two different schools. So I had one where I'm teaching at now, and one in Peterborough, where you'll sort of gain the teaching experience alongside obviously the methodology that you're learning at university. There are a few other routes into teaching. So there's one called a SCIT, which is a school-centered initial teacher training. You've got the schools direct as well, which is another one, and also Teach First. You may have heard of those, but they are slightly different because they are based more. You're more based at the school rather than there is no university involved. From my understanding,
Hmm.
you are, you could say, shoved into the deep end in the sense of you're on the job more, immersed in it more, if that makes sense.
And you're not just a teacher at this present time. You've gone back to being a student again, haven't you? So just tell us a bit more about what you're doing at the moment.
I am also doing the masters at University of Cambridge as well. So what I'm doing there is a masters in education, and we're transforming practice. So what I'm doing is basically looking at why do students find it hard to answer questions in a test, obviously, when they can answer verbally. So often I'll be in a class, I'll verbally, go through things with students so they can understand it, they can answer it, and I feel right, yeah. So I've got a good gauge that the students understand it.
Hmm.
When it comes to the test, or a plenary at the end of the lesson, they have no idea how to answer the question. So I'm looking at basically how the English language is used in tests, and what ways we can overcome those barriers.
So, for those listening who are interested in potentially pursuing a career in teaching or perhaps some other role in the field of education, what tips or advice would you share with them, Ryan?
So if you want to become a teacher, I would say do it because you really enjoy working with students, and that you have a passion to honestly want to help students, and get the best out of students,
Hmm.
and hopefully teach students, about life and about all the interesting things you can do in life, because you essentially, at the end of the day, you are a role model. It's really enjoyable, and if you think you can do that, then go ahead. But I have to admit that it's not something that anyone can do. It is a very demanding job.
Sure.
You have to be very patient, very, very patient with students, and it's not easy. But despite that, I find it really enjoyable, and I wouldn't change it.
Some valuable tips there, Ryan. It's been great listening to your teaching journey so far, and I wish you all the best with completing your master's degree as well.
Thank you.
And now we move on to my topic. This is the segment of the show where each guest has the opportunity to bring up a topic of their choice. So, Ryan, what's the topic you've chosen to discuss today?
It'd be good to look at teaching in the pandemic.
Teaching in the pandemic. That's an interesting one. As you all know, due to the coronavirus pandemic, it has been, of course, a very challenging time for schools and universities up and down the country. In 2020, many schools were forced to close. We had GCSEs and A-level exams. They were all cancelled. Many teachers have been teaching their classes online. The virus has forced teachers and students to adapt and change how they work or study. But Ryan, first of all, I just want to hear about how the pandemic has impacted on you on a personal level
Yeah.
when you're not in teaching mode, when you're perhaps with your family. Tell us, how have you been getting on with that so far?
It would be the same as everyone, really. It obviously hasn't been very nice being away from family, being away from friends, doing the normal sort of things that you do on the weekends. That's all sort of, you could say, gone almost.
Yeah.
Which obviously that's not been too good. I've always loved to go to my grandparents' house the weekends, especially for my sons. They love to go there, and obviously that's been taken away from them. The thing that has sort of worried my family most is that obviously my wife being Malaysian, she hasn't been able to see her family because of all this. So I feel a bit sorry for her.
Hmm.
It's the longest time she's been away from her family,
Yeah.
and also so during the pandemic we had our second son. So that was in July. So Yusha's mum was meant to come over for that, and obviously she missed that, which is a massive shame.
Hmm.
Um, but the positives of it, I've been at home more to be with my family, which has been nice. So the positives are, there are a few, but we should try to look on the bright side. So obviously I've spent much more time with my son, which has been quite nice.
I'm sorry to hear about the difficulties that you and your family have all been through, Ryan,
Oh
but
yeah,
it's also great to hear you mention some positive moments despite everything that's happened with the pandemic. So just tell us the impact the pandemic has had on you as a teacher.
yeah.
What challenges have you particularly experienced as a teacher in these times?
The first sort of major challenge would have been having to learn how to do online teaching. So yeah, that was rather stressful, to be quite honest. The school that I work in, we use Microsoft Teams, and that is a fantastic tool. Before the pandemic, you can put work online, you can set up the assignments online. If a student's absent, you can give them the work still, so they can catch up and everything like that. We had been using Teams anyway, but obviously then we had to switch to online learning. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we just set work online. That was the best thing that we could do, with basically with no notice, right? So we was doing that, and then we went to the online learning. But again, not every student was able to access that for various reasons.
Mm,
So we still had to do the online teaching for those students who were able to do it, but also upload work and do different work for the students that weren't able to access the online learning.
sure.
Um, so it was quite that was the sort of the main challenge. We've kind of got used to it now, so we're in a position where we can do quite a lot of online working easily now. It's still, it's very time consuming, but we're in a much better position to sort of
Mm.
handle the stresses of it, basically.
You've obviously mentioned a number of challenges there. I remember reading a BBC News article going back to September 2019. So, this was, of course, just before the pandemic happened. This was where a study by University College London, they found that teachers in England had been working long hours for the past 25 years. And so that's reportedly an average of 46 to 49 hours a week. But how many hours would you say that you're currently doing now since the outbreak of COVID?
I did a little calculation for this.
Oh, wow, you come prepared.
Yeah, I don't know how good this is, but so on an average day, I would arrive at 8. I'd arrive at school at 8 because I'm not an early bird. I I have 2 children. I need to sleep.
Oh, I see.
So I'll arrive at school at 8. But then I'll leave around 5:30, 6, depending on obviously things that I need to do. We can leave at 3:30, I think it is. But there's just no way that I'd leave it that early because I'd come home to obviously my family, and then not do any work because obviously you're with your family, and the children need daddy. So obviously I stay at work and I try and do all the work I can do at work, without bringing any work home. So roughly I'll be doing about 9 hours per day, and that's with the so-called 30-minute lunch break, which never is 30 minutes and never a break. I would also then spend at least 8 till 1 on a Saturday or a Sunday, depending on when Arsenal play football. That's usually how that works.
Oh, you're an Arsenal fan then as well.
Yes, unfortunately. So that's at least another 5 hours on the weekend minimum. Again, that's depending on what we have to do. So that is 50 hours already, by my calculations. But that's just if it's a normal week. That's not including weeks where we've got to do additional duties such as report writing, parents' evening, mock marking, if we're doing end of topic tests, then add on plenty more hours to that. So yeah, that's I would say about 50 hours if it's a week without additional duties. And I was just before coming on to this, I looked at some of the teacher retention rates. So one little stat for you that I got from the Department of Education. Between 2018 and 2019, the number of teachers that the Department of Education have only rose by 400. Considering how many teachers go on to the training courses and and all the courses that are available to teachers, only 400 went up. So obviously a lot of teachers left the profession last year as well. And if you want to look at over the decade, in 2010 there were 441,000 teachers in the United Kingdom, and as of last year there was only 453,000 teachers. So not a big increase of teachers, considering that's been 10 years, and also the number of schools that have opened, and also the population has increased as well, hasn't it?
Interesting statistics that you've shared there, Ryan. Are you concerned that we could see a drop in the number of teachers because of the pandemic? We're seeing and hearing more conversations around topics such as mental health and well-being, and even more so now since the pandemic began. I guess what I was asking earlier with regards to working long hours, and that was of course way before the pandemic, it seemed like that was already an issue. So the pandemic has only exposed and magnified these issues further, particularly when it comes to workload, and workload has been a major talking point in recent times, especially for many teachers across the country who have all been affected by that, some even having to seek medical help as well, which is of course very worrying. But do you think there is a growing concern that this is all going to get on top of teachers and they could end up leaving the profession entirely?
On the Department of Education, they've asked why these teachers have left, and the main reason is workload. So I can quote from the website. It says workload remains the most important factor influencing the teacher's decision to leave the profession, and most suggested solutions addressing retention were linked to workload in some way. So yes, I would 100% agree. Obviously, workload is something that needs to be tackled, but how is a different question. Also, one thing that people may not know, so when you do some of the teacher training courses, you can get government bursaries. But again, due to COVID, unfortunately, most of them have been either scrapped or significantly reduced. So again, that's not going to help teachers come into the profession, will it? So it is quite worrying.
Now, let's talk about the students. I know you touched upon this earlier about supporting student learning. So, could you tell us how students have been supported during the pandemic with their learning? Has it all been carried out online, or has some of it been done away from the internet, or maybe even the computer, like through paperwork and books? Tell us a bit more about that.
So students' lack of engagement, I would say, I reckon our school really did go above and beyond to overcome that. So our school provided lots of paperwork to so the parents could come into the school and collect some work for the students to do. So that was all prepared for them, which is really good. Um, and students weren't left to not do any work. If that makes sense, students had lots of opportunities um, to gain access to education in some form, whether it be online or whether it be through paper or books that the school had provided. So it's been really nice to see how how the school has really stepped up to this challenge, and the education and their sort of well-being has been the number one priority, and I'm really quite proud of how the school has handled it.
And moving on to well-being, how are students being supported on that front?
Everyone working at the school has helped in some ways, and it's been brilliant. So pastoral staff regularly ringing home to see how things are with the students and the parents. Even teachers ringing home. So I had to ring my form and my tutor group and my form class, and to see how my tutees were doing at home. And this was also a very good opportunity for me to find out if students were finding get access to the work difficult. So, for example, I had one student where where the parents said that they were having difficulty getting access to one particular subject. So all I had to do was email that teacher, and then it was overcome very quickly. The school was always doing regular updates to students about how they can access mental health help, and there were also some home visits as well, from obviously senior members of staff, which is really good. All these actions from the school are following sort of the safeguarding protocol, and I'm really quite chuffed with how amazing the school has sort of dealt with the whole unique situation.
That's amazing to hear, Ryan. Great work from the school in such challenging circumstances. What do you think could be done to make your job easier during this pandemic? And what sort of things would you recommend that would support you and your fellow colleagues?
As I say, yeah, hindsight is a lovely thing, isn't it? It's if you think about obviously what happened before sort of July. So if we talk about during the first lockdown, I honestly think the school and what happened, I only can speak about my own school. Obviously, I don't know what happened in other schools, but I think what the school did and how it supported us, and obviously my colleagues, was rather good. I can't really fault them. It was hard to adapt to situations, but again, it was getting constant updates and emails, and you know, we were given the sort of flexibility. If we made mistakes or if we didn't do something, then we had that flexibility. But obviously, since September, it's been obviously a bit harder with all the rules that they've got to follow from the government. Like the mask wearing, the children being certain distances from apart from each other. The one thing that has been quite hard, I think, especially for mental health, would be the lack of socializing, if you want to call it. So teachers cannot gain access to the canteens or any sort of staff rooms like that. So we have nowhere just to speak to one another, which is quite a shame, really. As you can imagine, you're going to work, you're busy as it is, but there's no time for you just to sort of have a little 5-minute chat with someone. So that has been quite hard.
Yeah, I guess the only way you can do that really is electronically. You just have to do it online, don't you?
Yeah, and that's the yeah, all meetings and all those kind of things are all electronically, obviously through Teams now as well. Um, so it's been quite difficult, but this again, the school that I'm working at, it's been on top of mental health in the sense of there's many services we're getting, regular reminders from HR saying, if there is any problems, and these are the counseling services that we provide all of our staff, and so I do feel like there are many um, sort of procedures that the school has gone through to sort of allow us to gain access to help if we needed to, which has been really quite good.
Yeah, the support has been there for you basically when you say that you needed that support, if you need basically that access to that, it's there for you.
Yeah,
That's very good to hear. And finally, just going forward, once we eventually return to some form of normality, or basically when we enter this kind of post-COVID world, if that's one way of putting it, what do you think, Ryan, could end up becoming the typical school day?
well, I think I think the majority of the head teachers across the country will um, see certain things happening um, that were better when compared to before the pandemic. But these would be small little things. They're not going to be big big changes. I think small little things like how breaks are, how students go for break, how students go for lunch. You know, Obviously we've got quite a few students to get them all into the canteen in during lunchtime is quite hard. So maybe small sort of changes there. How students transition between lessons, again, we've seen improvements in that because of COVID. Book storage, these sort of small little things like this, I think head teachers across the country will probably have seen better ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Even like I was thinking just now, like something like online parents' evening could be a thing of the future. You think that could also allow more parents to join in, possibly.
Mm.
Also, like whole school assemblies could be through like teams rather than getting everyone in and getting everyone out. And sort of a lot of time can be wasted that way. If it is in, for example, tutor time, and everyone's already in the classroom, and there's a live stream to the head teacher or to the person doing the assembly, then that could be a way forward. But other than that, I feel it will go back to normal. Apart from these small little changes.
Yeah, I guess it's more I think some of the things you've suggested, like these electronic changes, really.
Yeah.
Some of these things which maybe have already been implemented and become new habits. These could, because they've worked for us so well, it could be that they can now be used going forward in the long term.
Yeah, even one for the global warming and stuff. You think about we could go on to online homeworks as well, because again, that's what we've been using through Teams during this pandemic. So all the homework is uploaded onto Teams and submitted through Teams. So lack of paper or wasted paper, which should be quite good for the environment as well.
Great to hear some of your ideas, Ryan, and it will be interesting to see how schools move forward once we do return to some kind of normality. But thank you very much for bringing this topic to the U Suite today, for giving us such a valuable insights into your role as a school teacher, and also for sharing your experiences of teaching in the pandemic. It certainly has been a very challenging time for everyone in education, for teaching and non-teaching staff, and especially for children as well, at such a critical time in their learning and in their development. But once again, thank you very much for bringing this topic here today. We now move on to the final segment of the show, and this is called 60 Seconds. So this is a light-hearted but fast-paced quiz where I will now throw quick-fire questions to my guest about their favourite things. And all they need to do is answer as many as possible within 1 minute. So, Ryan, if you get stuck on any questions during these 60 seconds, all you have to do is just say pass, and I'll move on to the next question. Does that all sound okay to you?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Brilliant. Let's see if you can handle the pressure. So, your 60 seconds starts now. Favourite element of the periodic table?
Hydrogen.
Favourite school subject?
Science.
Favourite letter of the alphabet?
R.
Favourite actor?
Oh God, I hate actors. Ryan Reynolds.
Favourite sport?
Football.
Favourite London tube station?
Arsenal.
Favourite football team?
Arsenal.
Favourite social media channel?
Facebook.
Favourite internet browser?
Chrome.
Favourite car?
I'm not into cars. My car, Peugeot 2008.
Favourite ice cream?
Oh, a flake. A 99 flake.
Favourite video game?
Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2.
Favourite dish?
Oh, anything Malaysian.
Time's up. Your 60 seconds are up. How would you sum up that performance, Ryan?
What, my quick-fire question? I don't know. It was all right, I suppose.
Were there any there that kind of stumped you? Some of those questions have surprised you perhaps a little bit.
The periodic table one was the first one was all like, oh my god, really. Hydrogen's nice and easy for students to draw. That's like the one you'd start off with just to understand the electron channels and sort of break it into them really, because it's nice and easy to draw out with the dots and cross diagrams, especially for weaker students. You can progress from there. There's no point doing a hard one, with lots of electrons, because then you're gonna throw them off straight away, aren't you? So nice and easy to start with.
No, that seems a very measured response, Ryan. I'll take that one. That's fine. Anyway, what an effort from you, Ryan. You answered 12 questions correctly, which sends you joint top of the 60 seconds leaderboard. So congratulations. Unfortunately, I couldn't accept your answer for favourite dish, as I was looking for one particular dish and your response wasn't quite specific enough. So you just fell short of going first outright. Nevertheless, it was a fantastic effort. Great work. So let's take a look at the leaderboard. Ubaid Sajid from episode 2. He's got company now at the top, as he's joined by Ryan Johnson, who both have 12 points. Shohail Ahmed, who was in the first episode, is second with 10 points, followed by Nusayba Muhammad Timal of episode 3. She's got 8 points. This is looking more exciting than Eurovision. And on that note, we have come to the end of the show. Many thanks to Ryan Johnson for joining me at the Youth Suite. It's been great to learn more about your career and also giving an insight into your role as a teacher during the pandemic. It's been a really fascinating discussion, and I wish you all the best going forward. But before we wrap up, any final words from yourself?
Try to enjoy life. Like we said earlier on, always try to look at the positives if you can, because nowadays, as you can see, lots of people look at the negatives in life, but there are many positives amongst the negatives. So try and just be positive, and that's what I'm trying to do. And that's probably the best way to live life at the moment.
That's great, Ryan. Thank you very much indeed. That was Ryan Johnson, a science teacher from Cambridgeshire. If you'd like to be a guest on the Youth Suite, get in touch. Drop us an email at youthsuite@outlook.com. Youth Suite is free to listen to and available on any app that supports podcasts such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also find Youth Suite on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. Make sure to like, follow and subscribe so you can stay on top of all future episodes and receive the latest updates about this podcast series. Don't forget to spread the word and tell your family, your friends, everyone. Your support means everything. Join me again for the next episode from the Youth Suite. Until then, I've been Ibrahim Rahman. Thanks for listening, keep well and stay safe. It's goodbye for now.